Greetings Internet and welcome to Aaron Plays, and I hope you're doing fantastically well. This is going to be another deep dive into the rules, so there should be 3.2 where we carry on the action phase. I've done some highlighting. Again, it's amazing what you do on a Friday night when your partner's not home. I'll put a little short about that. So we're going to be looking at basically page 14, 15 and 16 this evening. The previous ones have dealt with earlier parts. So 3.1 we're done with the first parts of the action round. Option 2, or episode 2.1 did all about the operations. And 1.1 was the first 9 pages of the rules, covering the general course of play, squad generation, the actual squad record sheet, one of those, and all the other what the counters actually mean, mission cards and such forth. So that was 1.1. 1.2 was the operations phase, and sorry, not 1.2, 2.1. And 3.1 was the first part of the action rounds, and we're now into, as I say, we're doing page 14, half of page 14, page 15 and page 16 of the 27-page rulebook. So I'm going to take you to the map and occasionally the rule book, and let's see what's going on. Also, do remember the like, the subscribe, the comments, and the little ding-a-ling. Let's go down. So to go through this rule sections, I am joined by Sergeant Ambrose and the latest recruits to the squad, Hudson and Gibson. They're going to go through some of these rules. So performing actions during action rounds. So during the action phase of the action sequence, US and German soldiers perform actions. So if you watch the previous episode, I went through, let's just highlight all that section there, okay, describing what this all means. So definitely go and check that video out if you could. So, and then we come back to these lads, because I'm going to be referencing that grid quite a lot now. So the order in which soldiers perform actions is determined by their locations on that grid. When one of your soldiers gets a turn, you can have him perform one action, or you can have him pass. When he passes, simply move his action marker as if he'd performed an action. So I'm going to use my little men. So I've put most of these counters away now. So if we look at over there, we had a soldier that had an action marker in this space here. When an soldier became active, he would do an action and then drop down to there. When this guy had an action and performs it, he drops down to the completed. And the little meeple, he's just watching everything that's going on. Okay, and these could be interspersed with German actions. So I'll tell you what, let's put a couple of grey markers on, give them the disadvantage, and let's put these back on the grid there. So the way the sequence would work is this guy would perform an action and drop to there. This guy would then perform an action and drop into there. These two then perform an action and complete. And then these two in alphabetical order, because they're Germans, and then when they're done, they complete. This guy's still watching on. So that's a quick run through of what happens on there. I say the more detail is in the prior video 3.1. So let's go back to what's happening here. Okay. When it is a soldier's turn to go, and he's got to be unwounded, he can get a free stance change. Remember, there's 3 stances. You've got standing, crouching, and prone. Oi, Gibson, show me the prone. And there you place a prone marker. Hudson, now you crouch. You turn over the counter, and he's in crouch. Let's get them both back standing. So you are allowed a free stance change, and then any subsequent stance changes that you do cost a movement point. So therefore you'd have to have done a move action of some kind to get that movement point. And we'll go through the different types of combat actions and move actions as we go through this video. Therefore, a wounded soldier does not get a free stance change. So if he makes a stance change, he would have to do a move action and spend a movement point. When a soldier enters a hex, a paragraph check is made before he can make the stance change, free or otherwise. So if you've been watching the actual missions, you'll actually know when I'm in the operations phase, I tend to put them all into crouch and move in a crouch status, because if I move into a new hex and I'm standing and the paragraph says something, I can't change his stance until after the events of the paragraph. Very critical. So now we're going to go into combat related actions. So you can aim fire once with a personal weapon. So both Hudson and Gibson are armed with semi-automatic rifles. So they can attack with aimed fire once as an action. And they can target anyone that they can actually see. And he must be standing or crouching. He cannot be prone. And also that could be a bazooka if it had been previously prepared. So crouching or standing with a personal weapon or a prepared bazooka. That's the first combat action. Second one is snap fire. So aim fire you get 1, snap fire with a personal weapon you get 2 shots. They're not as effective, but you're actually able to fire twice. Again, you're going to be standing or crouching, and this you definitely can't do with a bazooka. You cannot snap fire a bazooka. Then the next one is aimed fire with a crude weapon. A crude weapon, we're looking at something like a medium machine gun or a light machine gun. You can aim fire with a crude weapon, and it's got to contain at least 2 soldiers crouching to do it. Both soldiers simultaneously spend 1 turn performing this action. So let's go back to my little grid over here. So even if we had those 2 in separate places and they want to fire an aim fire with, say, a medium machine gun, they would both spend 1 turn. So he would become complete and he would have 1 turn left. You can also snap fire with a crude weapon, and it can only be done if the hex contains at least 1 crouching active soldier. If the hex contains 2 or more active soldiers, the weapon can be snap fired twice at a cost of 1 action for each of the 2 soldiers. Thus, a crude weapon with 2 operators could make 1 aimed fire, as we've just showed with those little markers, or 2 snap fires at a cost of 2 actions, 1 for each soldier. A crude weapon always uses snap fire when it's fired by a single soldier. And the risk of snap fire? Well, the chance of hitting is less, but also the chance of jamming the weapon is increased. Assault. Soldier must be standing in the hex with an enemy soldier to assault. Prepare satchel charge. Soldier must be crouching or standing to prepare a satchel charge. So let's give a satchel charge. Well, don't give it to Hudson. No, we'll give it to Gibson. I'll normally stick these weapons underneath the guy who's owning them. So Gibson's now got a satchel charge, so he could spend one of his actions to prepare it. And then if he had a second action, or a second turn, or he have to wait to the next turn, if he didn't, he could then throw it. So it takes one action to prepare it, and one action to throw it. Remember, you're only getting one action per turn. Next thing, another action you can do is prepare and throw a hand grenade. And note that is one action to prepare and throw a grenade. The reason being, obviously a grenade is smaller than a satchel charge, and probably all you've got to do is pull a pin out, whereas I presume with the satchel charge you've got to do some rummaging inside it to prepare it. I don't know, join wires. I've never messed around with a satchel charge, so I'm not quite in what's involved to do it, but it obviously takes a bit more time than throwing a grenade. To throw a grenade, you've got to be standing or crouching again, and if you're crouching, the throw is less accurate. Another thing you can do is prepare a bazooka. Soldier must be standing or crouching in a hex with an unloaded bazooka and one of the rocket missiles. Another action you can do is clear a jammed weapon. So if a weapon's jammed, you look at the jam table, you roll on that as an action to see if you've unjammed it or broken it, which can happen. Now we have a special action which can occur when some nasty German lobs a grenade in your hex. So let's just zoom out a little bit. So we've got I presume he's a lovely bloke. We've got Nyman here. Nyman the German. And he lobs a grenade into Gibson's hex. This is the remove live grenade from a hex. This special action is performed out of turn and play, and if the soldier is standing or crouching, you must make a PC check. This also can involve a special free stance change, which I'll go through in detail when we go through the weapons, but it is an action. He could pass his PC check, so glad it wasn't Hudson, because Hudson's only got a perception of 1. Gibson's at least got 2, so that's at least a 30% chance of getting rid of that grenade, and it's out the hex. And the last combat action is prepare a crude weapon. One soldier in the same hex with all parts of the weapon must spend one action to prepare it for fire. To carry a crude weapon normally takes 2 guys, so they would have to be in the same hex with both parts to actually assemble the weapon, and once it's assembled, it stays assembled until it's moved again. And when it moves, it doesn't have to have a breakdown action, it automatically can move. So that's all the combat actions. Now the movement related actions. The first one is move, and you can spend up to the soldier's movement allowance, which depending, most of the soldiers have got 4. Some, I'm looking at you, Hudson and Gibson, have only got 3, so they can't move as far. A crouching soldier can only move 1 hex, which costs all his movement points. You can move a crude weapon. Crude weapons require 3 port boxes to do so. Remembering each soldier only has 2 port boxes. So to be moved, 2 soldiers in the same hex with a weapon must divide its port box cost between themselves. They then can move separately, but then to put the weapon together again, they must be in the same hex. Another option is move snapfire. So you can expend up to half of a soldier's movement point allowance and snapfire with their weapon. Remembering you had the combat action which allowed you to snapfire twice. Now you could do a move of up to half your movement allowance and then still fire. The movement allowance is rounding fractions down. So Gibson and Hudson, who only have 3 movement points, could only effectively spend 1 to be able to snapfire. Ambrose is currently shaking his head. You'll improve, lads. You'll improve. The order in which the movement and the fire takes place makes no difference. So you could move, then fire, or fire, then move. Another option of moving is move charge assault. You expend up to half a soldier's movement point allowance and then charge into an opposing hex. Remember, one of the combat actions was literally assault. A move charge assault, the movement allowance is again fractions rounded down, and once you get into the opposing hex, you then assault the enemy. Again, that would mean that these two numpties could only do it by moving one hex. Another option for moving is drag an inactive soldier. This is where you're carrying one of your wounded guys, or incapacitated, not wounded, incapacitated. The soldier must be standing in the same hex as an inactive soldier to be moved, and must have one port box empty, so you couldn't do it if you were carrying a crude weapon. The dragging soldier must remain standing while he drags the guy. And if the inactive soldier is incapacitated, there's a chance he will be killed, and you'd make a die roll. On a 0, he would die. The other option, you could be carrying or picking up a dead dude. Obviously, you can't make him any worse. Why you'd want to carry a dead guy, I presume you've got to, if there's a restriction or you get victory points back, you could possibly do that. You might want to carry a dead German. They might have information on him. I don't know. But if he's incapacitated, there is a chance you could actually kill him. Miscellaneous actions. So you can pick up and exchange equipment. So there's a bit of a rifle on the floor or a machine gun. You can pick it up. And also, if you've got the two of you guys in the same hex, they could exchange weapons. The other option is you could unload an inactive soldier from a vehicle. Again, there is a chance of killing the dude. When you do this, you roll a 0 and he's gone. And you've got to again be standing to do this. The next and the last action is give a turn. This is where a commander, and only commanders, can actually give an action to one of his in-command soldiers. So looking at that example we've got there, Ambrose, Hudson and Gibson. So if we move this over to here, and this is where we're going to use this guy. So let's say that's the situation. It's Ambrose I've decided to activate, and I can use Ambrose to say, right, Hudson, you're having an action. This will mean that Ambrose goes to complete, but Hudson will move up on the chart. You can't give this to wounded orders to wounded soldiers because they can only ever have one action. It could even be done to a soldier that's in the complete box. You must be within 2 hexes because that's your command range. And then, because of the chain, he would now be the next person to activate in this little sequence. He would perform his first action. Then, as they're both on this space, I can choose which order these will be done in, and then completed. Okay, so we're into German actions. So when a German soldier receives a turn during the action sequence, you must have him perform an action. However, the soldier's actions are not up to the player. You must use the soldier card. So it's what we've been looking at. These things here, the soldier card. Now, I have gone through this, but it doesn't hurt to go through it again. So on here, we have all the German information, the actual, what card he is, the letter he's using, victory point awards, his initiative, perception, weapon skill, movement point allowance, what type of German he is, snipers, NCOs, general soldiers, what he's armed with, and these here determine what he actually does, which paragraph we look at in the paragraph book, depending on the condition level, which progresses forward throughout the game, and then special conditions that might come in. Okay, the S one is a self-preservation. These will relate to different paragraphs. I had an A, which would That wasn't that one. Yes, so this is the original German sniper, who then developed a condition, so I stuck an A chit under his name to remind me that he was looking at this paragraph in particular, wasn't looking at these, no matter what the condition level, he was looking at the A paragraph because he'd been instructed to do so. We then look at the die roll on the German action chart, which is that here, which is done at the beginning of the first turn, and then when you go into the second turn you roll it again, and then whatever number's rolled there refers to the paragraph here, which we then follow the instructions of. When reading the indicated paragraph, some of them have bullet points, some of them have numbers. So if they are in bullet points, you take the one that's closest to the German's condition, the soldier's current situation on the board. The numbered ones, you do in numerical order. You check the first one. If you can do the first one, he does it. If he can't, he'll do the second one. If he can't do that one, he'll do the third one, and so on. If he can't do any of them, then effectively he passes. Yes, we do it's still an action check for the German, but if he can't carry out any of the instructions, or he can cover some of them, you do them to the maximum of their capability. When it comes to movement, so when he's instructed to move, you look at the hex he's in, and on the actual conditions paragraph matrix, and that will have a hex written in red where he will move to. And depending on the type of movement, it might be a single hex movement, it might be a full movement. If it's a single hex movement, fine, that's as far as where they end up. If it's a continuation movement, you look at the next hex, what he's just moved into, and look what that's on the paragraph, and that will tell you where he moves to for his next, and he moves as far as his movement point allowance is. And if it comes up with an exit instruction, then he can actually move off the map. So let's just show you what I mean by that. So say Nyman here has had an instruction to move by the whatever is led through on here, and he's starting in that hex. We look at this chart here, and we're looking at R15, R13. So we line them up. There's R, and there's 13. Okay, and that takes us to this box here, which we're looking at the red text. It says he moves to R14. So we'd move him on the map board to R14, and then we'd look at that where that takes us. So we're moving that now to the R14 hex. So that's there, and it's actually right at the bottom here. It tells us he goes to S15. So we've now moved him to S15, and now so far he's actually used 2 movement points. Okay, so now we look at S15, which is here, which actually, S15 takes us to T15. So on the map, he'd move to there. That's his 3rd movement point. And he's now at T15. So we'll line that up. So it's T16 at the moment. So we'll move that to T15. T15 actually lines up at the top. Yeah, it looks a bit pissed, but I guarantee you that goes up to there if I actually line that flat. So that goes to U16, which is there, and that would be his 4th movement point. And that's it, job done. So we mentioned special reactions on their cards. We've got the A and the B. Different ones have different meanings. When they come into effect, there's a separate roll on the action track, and it remains in effect for that chap until something else takes it and tells him it doesn't apply. So whenever those are camouflaged, say you make a roll on that action track, and then from then on all other Germans will follow in that order until the next turn. The special one here for special preservation, all Germans have the S column, and that comes into effect if they are in a hex with a US soldier or adjacent to a US soldier. That takes precedence over all of these other columns. And some paragraphs, I might even ask the German to surrender. If he's in a hex with a US soldier, he'll surrender immediately. So he falls prone and then captured. And if he's not in a hex with a US soldier, he becomes inactive. So you go on to the inactive thing on the column on the chart here. And he will basically wait for a US soldier to come and pick him up. He's out of the game. The actual rule book gives some examples. Okay, so first example is paragraph 800, lie prone. And it says here the soldier falls prone if not already prone. He does nothing else that turn. That's it. 802, which I am beginning to see quite frequently in some of these paragraphs. It says crouch, then conduct best fire at closest target, fall prone after fire if free stance change available. Just having a drink. So following what it's saying in that instruction, it gives a nice little paragraph. I'm going to read it verbatim. So remember, the paragraph is saying crouch, then conduct best fire at closest target, fall prone after fire if free stance change available. So let's use Nyman as an example. Let's put him there. Okay, so crouch. He's standing at the moment, so he would crouch. So, and in the breakdown he said, if not yet crouching, the soldier uses his free stance change to crouch. If in a crouching position the soldier can see no active US soldiers, his turn ends. But he can see active US soldiers. Otherwise, he then conducts fire combat. He would normally conduct aimed fire, since this is the best fire possible, because it's the most accurate. If wounded, he would conduct snap fire if required to make a stance change to crouching. Because remember, when you're wounded, you don't get a free stance. So if he was up here wounded, he'd go to a crouch, but that means he's expended a movement point. And by expending it, I can see my camera sort of dipping here. There it goes. Oh, why is it doing that? Okay, hopefully that's a bit more stable. So going through back that over again. So if he was wounded and he was standing, he'd have to expend a movement point to get into a crouch position, which means he would not be able to do an aim fire. He'd have to do a snap fire, because if you remember earlier, if you expend movement points, it's a move and fire option. So even though it doesn't say that in the text, it just says best fire possible at closest target. So in this case, the closest target would be Gibson. Okay. If wounded but already crouching, he would be able to use his aim fire as normal. The target of his fire is the US soldier that's closest to him in hexes. If two more targets are equal close, he fires at the easiest target. So it depends on the terrain. If the easiest target is the US soldier, the German soldier has the best chance to hit. And so on. If there's a tie, then you determine it randomly who you'd actually shoot at. But in this situation, you'd fire at Gibson. After resolving the fire, the German falls prone if he has a free stance change available. In other words, if we started the whole sequence in crouch, because it said he has to crouch, he's already in the crouch, therefore he has a free stance change available, he would then go prone. If he doesn't have that free stance, he remains crouched. And that's all from that 2 lines of text. Paragraph 807, it says, if active target in sight, crouch and conduct best fire at easiest target. Fall prone after fire if free stance change available. And that's the first bullet point. Second bullet point, if no target in sight, run into clear road or interior hex, or crawl into any other type. So in other words, if none of these guys were here, he would move if there was no target in sight. So that's from one paragraph giving two separate options, and you take the one that's of those two is best available or only available. And then paragraph 833 has got four numbered options. If active US soldier in hex, assault to kill. So if Hudson was in there with him, it would be an assault to kill. If adjacent to a US soldier, to activate through a transversal hex side, you can move through it, and a grenade is available, crouch and throw grenade. 3. If active US soldier in sight, so if he was there, crouch and conduct best fire. If none of those apply, option 4, fall prone. And then you do those in numerical order. You look at number 1 first. No, that's not possible. Look at number 2. No, that's not. Then you keep going. And those are effectively 4 sequential options. That's the 3 examples, 4 examples it gives. And if you've got the rule book there on page 16. The last 2 sections of what we're doing in this episode. One is German activation when US soldiers have yet to enter. This is right at the beginning of the game. If some US troops haven't entered, and the German activation occurs in that first round, because of US troops off the board, they do not get a warning. It's not a warning. Awareness check, because they're off board and they won't be coming on the board in the first round. In the second round, US soldiers make awareness checks. Those that succeed receive turns and can come on the board. If they don't come on and they failed the awareness test, which is a perception check, they'll have to wait till turn action round 3. So that's what you do if there's still US troops off the board. And then if they're off the board, they're not subject to any form of attack, such as artillery that goes off board or anything like that. They just wait until they come on. And the last section, condition changes during rounds. So conditions change during the operations phase, and they can occur during the rounds. And it's pretty similar. When the conditions change, replace the mission card as usual. Conduct paragraph checks with our US soldiers. Ignore all event checks, but read all other paragraphs. And if any Germans do activate through those paragraphs, then they join the action chart as per. Oh, see, I've tightened it's so tight now I can't actually move the camera. Oh dear. Okay, hold on. So that's pretty much it for this actual episode, going through the rules. The next one will be covering movement, but the action round and that little is the whole meat of the actual game. I wonder if any of you have been wondering what these counters are. Well, this is Caesar's legions. Get prepared. Clipping the counters, so clipped, unclipped, and this is just the Romans. So a couple of hours work to be done there. What have the Romans ever done for us? Because I've done quite a few episodes during the course of the last 2 days for this. I thought I'd better do one dealing with the rules. And yeah, let's bring you back up. And that's it. So that's the crucial part of the rules covered. We've still got another episode which will cover movement and probably line of sight. Then we'll have one on fire combat, which I'll include satchel charges and grenades. Then we'll have another episode on assault, minefield and booby traps and damage, which will take us to page 27. So there's about 3-4 episodes still to go for this deep dive in the rules. Then we'll do campaigns, vehicles. We've already had a vehicle activate in the actual mission. And then it'll be just scenario specifics. So we're getting there. I hope that was helpful. Until next time, do me the favour, the likes, subscribe if you haven't done so already, you enjoy what I do. Comments is always much appreciated. And the little ding-a-ling bell. But until next time, have fun, enjoy your gaming. Bye, Internet.